So I clipped out of, I took a bunch of notes as I was reading, and I just pulled out little bits here and there. And I thought I would maybe hand you some of these small quotes and see what you make,
Okay.
because
Sure, let's do
there's
it.
too much to cover the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I thought we might be able to just play around with some ideas. Um, One of the things he says is voluntary confrontation with emergent anomaly is the best bet.
Yeah, so I think he says that this is like one of the number one qualities that makes a hero is the willingness to voluntarily confront the unknown. And that resonates with me because I also think that's what I think of when I think of the artists. Like I think that for me, the hero and the artist are synonymous as ideas, as archetypes, and it's the artist's task to voluntarily confront the unknown, which is to say voluntarily confront chaos and turn that chaos into meaning by way of creating art. So I mean, this is less of the archetype of the father and more the archetype of the hero. But of course, this person is a product of both the benevolent father and the benevolent mother, right? This person embodies the good characteristics of both. And one of those characteristics is to view the unknown and or chaos for the positive elements that come from encountering it, as opposed to being so terrorized by it and so overcome by it that one just decides to be inactive. And one of the things, this has really influenced my views on nihilism, which I think is cowardice, basically. So yeah, I mean, that would be my very like quick summary of what I think of that statement.
Well, I love that you brought up the artist, because that was the first thing I began to notice. When I started reading that book, Maps of Meaning, it was so difficult because he was talking about many disciplines that I've never studied. He was talking about all sorts of psychologists' ideas and philosophers and history and things that I hadn't delved into in the past. So I'm swimming through this ocean of stuff.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, it sort of snapped into focus for me. And I realized the thing that snapped it into focus for me was I am an artist. And so in refining my own sort of method and style, I've studied creativity for years, and especially the elements and principles of design. And the elements and principles of design just laid right over the top of Maps of Meaning, and it acted like a translation key almost. So I could be reading some paragraph in that book that didn't make any sense to me at all until the key occurred to me. And then once the key occurred to me, it was like, oh yes, I get exactly what you're saying. So when you said that about art and creativity, or about the artist and the hero, my personal method for painting is, and I've done this for years, long before I ever heard of Jordan Peterson, I create a bunch of chaos on the canvas as much as I can. And then I look to see what's there. And then out of it, I create something. Because I'm not good at just taking a blank sheet and superimposing something on it. I go through this other process. So it's as though I was talking to a physicist one day, and he was talking about stochastic resonance as a way of.
Well, what's that?
Well, it's I think stochastic just basically means random, but it's an idea where when they have let's say they have a audio of some sound, but the sound is not adequate to understand what they're saying.
Okay.
They will add some additional random resonance to it, and that will somehow interact with the signal that's already there and amp part of the signal so that
then you can discern it?
So that you can discern it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that's exactly the way it looks to me when I'm doing this art. I've got all this chaos on there, that at a certain point when I had just enough, it's like it'll come into focus, and I'll see, oh, there's a woman in there.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something behind her, and then I'll start working with that. It's like
so you're basically able to like sift it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes, I might get started on something and then I have to add more chaos in order to amp the signal for myself.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
that's that with the hero's journey, they're always going over into the chaos to see what's there that's useful to bring back to revivify the too structured order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's so meta. Because it applies to so many different literary traditions. You find it in literary traditions, you find it in, you know, the arts writ large. It's such a part of our DNA, you know, our biology as human beings, and it's really fascinating to. And that's the other reason why I call it enchantment, because I'm filled with wonder at the idea that these patterns have existed in so many different forms throughout for as long as we've existed as a species. And that is crazy to me. That means that we are correct when we consider these things timeless. They're actually timeless. And so we can expect to have these sort of wise teachings continuously come up throughout every generation, because we're not going to stop being human. And so for as long as we're human, these are going to be things that are necessary to learn and relearn and relearn, you know, throughout the ages.
Well, and for the 2 years I've been messing around with this channel, I've been talking to physicists and chemists and technology entrepreneurs and computer scientists, and it is completely meta. It runs through everything.
Yeah.
Not just art. It runs through everything.
That's wild. Yeah. It's like becoming privy to the pattern, to the code, which is the name of your podcast. It's like becoming privy to the code of creation itself. It's like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so here's another quote.
Okay.
Ingratitude tends to see only the tyrannical side of the father, not the benevolent, creative, and protective side, which I guess we've already covered to an extent. So let me just add on to that one more thing.
Sure.
Those who climb the hierarchy with politics and power resent those who are climbing with competence and creativity.
Oh, that's interesting, given what we're dealing with right now in American society. And given that power has become such an objective in a lot of political conversations being had right now. Power for its own sake, not power in order to create you know, meaning out of chaos, or to imbue the lives of your fellow human beings with meaning. Just power for its own sake. And yes, it is the politicians or folks in the political world, not necessarily just politicians, but folks who speak with a hyper political language, and therefore desiccated language, who think that everything is political. And I think maybe it was Camille Paglia who actually said, or maybe it was Camille Paglia, maybe someone else, who said that if once a society thinks that everything is political, it's proof that that society's culture is in decay. If it thinks that everything is political. So I'm thinking of that idea when I think of this statement. Also, to your earlier point about, you know, ingratitude, I would say yes, like this, the person who sees only the tyrannical aspects of the father doesn't understand the importance of order and of rules and of discipline in society. Doesn't understand that without that there's total chaos, and that, you know, we can drown in chaos, we can die, we can literally, our culture can become dead by too much chaos. I think we're seeing that right now because of the effects of COVID-19 and things of that nature. So yeah, I would agree that that person who only sees the tyrannical aspects of the father doesn't understand the other side of the benevolent aspects of the father that provides security and order and balance, without which you couldn't exist as a human being. If everything was constantly chaotic, right, you just wouldn't be able to function. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, and in one of the quotes I think I picked out from you, maybe, that on the other side of tyranny is not freedom, but chaos.
Oh, maybe I said that. I don't remember.
If it was either you or Jordan Peterson. But anyway, I think it's
There you go.
an idea. And
Yeah.
I want to kind of use that to bring us back to your opening, Salvo, when you were talking about love and how you started all this because you wanted to teach people about love.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier today, I was writing some things down, and one of the things I wrote down was that communication has enough difficulties of its own, but those difficulties get magnified if you hear everything through an ideological lens. If you hear
Yes.
always that this political structure governs everything that a person says, then
Mm-hmm.
when you hear what they say, you can't separate their idea from the person or from
Mm-hmm.
the box that you assume that they live in.
Mm-hmm.
And
You
then you
caricature
also
them.
you can't separate your own ideas from your own box.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done. We've limited ourselves into these little, I think John Vervaeke calls it reciprocal narrowing. We've just kind of
Mm.
made ourselves into smaller and smaller and smaller circles. There's a thing in
Yeah.
physics where they talk about particles that will eventually crystallize into a complete crystalline structure if you just remove enough space. And that's the way it is. The ideas become so lacking in entropy and lacking in potential information because everything is
Mm-hmm.
just solidified into this one thing. So you can't hear what another person is saying. You can only judge them because you've already adopted their entire point of view. If they say A, you know that what they really mean is A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so until you can learn to separate the person from the idea and leave an open space where you can see both ideas simultaneously, your idea and their idea, you can hold them both loosely and try to find if there's a space between there for some sort of creative endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really have real communication because it's even at the best of times, it's difficult for me to say something through my filter and have it go through your filter and have it mean anything at all.
Right. Yeah. Like in general, that's a difficult
Yes.
exercise. I think this goes back to my observation that, like, what you said earlier about a person not being able to even understand their own positions outside of the political structure in which they exist is a perfect indication that they have no real relationship with themselves,
Mm.
which is what I think a lot of these issues that arise in society stem from. It's like James Baldwin was talking about this in the 60s, how individuals did not have just a basic relationship with themselves, how everything was like a set of attitudes toward ideas, as opposed to like thinking through ideas on your own and using your own intelligence to come to your own conclusions. It was sort of like you're taking cues from the society around you and you're assuming that whatever the majoritarian political structure is, that is what defines you as a human being. And so we have a lot of fixing or healing to do because this is really far more prominent than I thought, and I'm seeing that now with a lot of what's going on in America, during COVID and everything that's going on. There are a lot of, Peterson uses this term, the ideologically possessed.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of ideologically possessed individuals and institutions right now, and I don't think I really realized that prior to this moment that I'm living in right now.